All right, I hope you can hear me and see my screen. Um, so in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about a project I've been working on. So the title is called Differentiable Search of Evolutionary Trees from Leaves. First, let's try to, so this work was done with Avi and Sergey along the past months. So first, let's see what this title means actually. So after giving this title, I wanted to see whether I gave a good title. So I just, yeah. So, so I asked Google Bard whether what it understood from this title. So differentiable search of evolutionary trees from leaves. Okay, so it understood that evolution trees are important in computer science or in biology in general. And differentiable search is a technique to search using gradient descent. Okay, so we all know that leaves are at the bottom of an evolution tree. So in other words, this title means that we are using gradient descent to search for evolutionary trees. So yeah, then I wondered whether the past 8 months, the work I've been doing, whether someone has done it or not. Then I asked whether there's any related work on this. Then to my surprise, it showed several examples. So differentiable phylogenetics, neural phylogenetics, and Bayesian phylogenetics. So I was a bit shocked to see that the past 8 months, what I've been doing is already out there. But after a quick Google search, I found that these were made up. But Bayesian phylogenetic approaches are already out there. I was lucky that, people haven't relaxed the trees in general and done it without any deep learning. So here what we are looking at is, without any training data, can we approach this combinatorial problem using gradient descent? So let's so in this talk, let's talk about why do we need trees in the first place, and then let's talk about how can we search for trees. So what's the current methods that approach this problem? Then our methods and what are the results. So when we talk about evolution trees, so at some point in life, we have been wondering, where do we come from, right? So we've been thinking a lot about how do we exist, where do we come from, etc. So in general, phylogenetic trees are important for us to get a weave to our past. Let's say a couple of billion years to the past. How were we descended from hypothetical ancestors? So phylogenetic trees give us an idea about how the current species exist out there may have evolved from previous ancestors. So those ancestors might not exist today. So so I think in terms of people working on evolutionary biology, so for example, I think in Sergey's lab, Kwan is working on looking at how archaeas and eukaryotes evolved. So through this type of analysis, they have this hypothesis that let me see, I can get the pen. This point. Yeah. So they have there's this, through this evolutionary analysis, they have this hypothesis that eukaryotes may have evolved from an ancestral archeon. So like that. So people are looking into how the current species exist out there may have been evolved from different branches of species. So it's not just about the past. So let's say about certain viruses. So these phylogenetic analyses have provided some info about how some insights on how transmissions may occur, how outbreaks can occur, and tracking certain virus genetic changes. So in general, phylogenetic trees are helpful for us to look at how things evolve and how things may have evolved. So now that we know why do we need trees, So we need to have some sort of a metric to say whether one tree is good than another. So there are a couple of approaches to say whether one tree is better than the other. So one is the parsimony score, which is our focus today. So here what we are looking at is when we have a tree, how many evolutionary changes has happened in this tree. So what I mean by that is, so let's say we have these edges, right? So in this tree, so we have some species that exist out there, and we have built a tree with these hypothetical ancestors. So just to give you an idea, so each of these species can be represented by a sequence. So if I quickly erase everything, so it can, so here I've just looked at, so in this project I've been working on, we are looking at hypothetical sequences of 256 length. So we can think of it as a particular gene of a species. So for example, I think in our bacteria project, Swerve was looking at the 16S gene of bacteria, which is, um, I think it's around 1,000 base pairs long, I guess. So like that, there can be particular marker genes in species that we can use to build these trees. So once we have these sequences, we can count the number of evolutionary changes that has happened. So for example, here in this branch, we can see that this yellow element has changed to a blue element. So so we can count it as a evolutionary change of 1. For example, right here, we have two things which have changed. So there's the evolutionary cost of 2. So in this context, we are just giving a change of 1 for any combinatorial change. That means from any amino acid to another, I'm just regarding it as the same cost of changing, but in reality, there can be weights as well. So moving from one amino acid to another, that can depend on that particular choice of transition. So this parsimony score means the total number of evolution changes that we are looking at this tree. So here, if in order to evaluate whether a tree is better than another or not, we use this metric. Yeah, so there are other methods as well in the literature to build trees, but in our context, we are just focusing on this parsimony score. By the way, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Yeah. So now that we know why trees are important and how can we quantify whether a tree is good or not, let's see how many trees are possible. So if we look at this diagram, yeah, so you can see that when the number of leaves changes, so let's say we have 100, oops, sorry, I had this time on the slides. Let me quickly share it again. Okay. Yeah, so when we have 2 leaves, we can just construct one bifurcating tree. So what I mean by bifurcating is that at each parent, there's just 2 children. So now we are just looking at how many trees are possible. So if we have 4, yes, yeah, sure.
So here, like, does this have like the length of the sequence affect this number?
No, actually. So if we have the number of leaves, we can directly quantify the number of tree topologies using the number of leaves.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we are looking at counting the number of bifurcating trees, so at each parent there's just 2 children. So for 2 leaves, we can quickly assume there's just 1 tree, right? So, however, for 4 leaves, there's 15 tree topologies possible, and this number grows really quickly. When we look at around 128 leaves, we have 10 to the 250th power of tree topologies possible. So yeah.
If you ask one more question, so
Sure.
basically, like, if you quantify it in this way, like, so now you are like fixing the number of leaves, right?
Yeah.
But then you need a sequence to put in the leaves, right?
Yes.
So that means like you know all the ancestors, hypothetical
Um,
ancestors, or does that information come from somewhere?
yeah, that's a good point. So, yeah, so even if we have all the sequences of ancestors and the leaves, it has around this number of topologies. And let's say, yeah, so let's say we know all the, so in the actual case, we know all the species, the leaf nodes. So, so if we are to enumerate all the possible tree topologies, we have this much number of elements. However, as you mentioned, we have to find the ancestors as well. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Oh,
So,
so when you said leaves, you means like this is without the ancestors. This is only the bottom.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
yes, yes. So, yeah, that's true.
without the
So,
intermediates.
yeah, so I'm actually interested in bifurcating trees because of that. When I have n leaves, at most I can have n minus one ancestors. So in total, I'm looking at trees with two n minus one total nodes. So so here I'm counting the number of leaves. So for 128 leaves, this total number of topologies are possible. However, as you mentioned, um, the ancestors also we actually need to infer. Yeah. Uh, yeah. So so if we now that you actually asked that question about how do we find ancestors, so if we look at a 256 residue protein, 256 residue length sequence, so there's like this much number of possibilities for a sequence as well. So how this number came from is like for each position, we have 20 possible amino acids possible for each position. So since we have 256 positions, like this is the number of possibilities for one sequence. So if we are to look at all the possibilities, yeah. Um, so that's just some background info about the naive case of enumeration. I'm looking at the tree and the ancestor. So there are two variables, the tree topology and the ancestors. So yeah, now that we have an idea about how big the tree space is, so this is another example of visualizing all the 15 topologies for a four element, four leaf tree here. So here you can, I think that these letters are a bit small, but the point is there are like different permutation for these leaves on the ordering. So we can have that much of possibilities. Uh, yeah. So, uh, so if you all have any questions, feel free to let me know. Or I hope so that now that we have established that the tree space is pretty big and that we cannot actually enumerate this all the possible combinations. So how do current methods work? So the current approaches actually work based on some heuristics. So the goal is we do not need to try out every possibility because it's not possible at all. So we can start from a good guess and try to iteratively refine it such that we can obtain a better tree. So based on some great heuristics, we can come to a good tree topology, and then we can explore some other topologies around that tree. So there are approaches called neighbor joining methods. So we just look at the pairwise distances. So if we have, let's say three species, we can actually compute a matrix of pairwise distances and fill out this matrix. So once we have this matrix, we actually lose information about the sequences, but from this metrics, we can build a good tree topology. So each of these values will mean some uh, distance between those two species. So neighbor joining methods start with this matrix, disregarding all the sequence element-wise info, and they that those methods can actually come to a good tree topology. And yeah, so that's neighbor joining methods, and there are other methods as well where we can um, actually so those are called like tree rearrangement methods. So we can swap branches and try to find more tree topologies. So in this work, we are asking the question, can we traverse this tree space in a different manner? So yeah, so in these deep learning methods, we actually, so in like language models or anything, we have billions of parameters, and we are simply using gradient descent to traverse, I mean, traverse in the sense to find a good parameter set for these deep learning models, right? So in this question, we are asking, so we have this pretty big tree space. Can we traverse this space, these possible tree topologies, using gradient descent based signal? So if we have some view about, if we are looking at this landscape, so let's say each of these height will say whether a tree is good or not. So if we had a way to actually look at from a bird's eye view, what's the point with the minimum value, so we can find the global optimum solution. But we are trying to see whether based on some gradient signal, we can traverse this space. All right. So now we have to establish what problem we are going to solve. So there are a couple of problems that we can try initially. The first one is, so if we have all the information about the, yeah, so there are three tasks that I'm actually evaluating on. So the first task is, if we know the ancestors, can we find the tree? That's the first task. That's very simple problem. If we know the ancestors and the leaves, leaves are of course given, can we find the tree? And the next problem is, given a tree and the leaves, can we find the ancestors? The last task is the hardest problem. Learn the ancestors and the tree both given the leaves. So I'll illustrate what these problems mean in a visual manner so that it's easy to understand. So the first problem is, we know everything like this. We just need to find the tree topology. So it's sort of a hierarchical clustering task where we know all the nodes, but we want to find out the relationship. So that's the first task. And the second task, we know the tree. That means these blue edges are known, but we want to infer these ancestors. That's the second task. So for this problem, there's like nice algorithmic solutions as well called Sankoff algorithm, where we can quickly find out these ancestors. So for this problem, there's like a nice, I think it's, I mean, polynomial time solution. So uh, since this is a small problem, we can sort of evaluate how well our gradient descent based approach works. Now we come to the like hardest task where we don't know the ancestors. So each of these hypothetical nodes or parents are unknown, and the tree is unknown as well. So this is the hardest problem where there's no, this is like NP-hard problem. So there's, I mean, there's no polynomial time solution. So we are trying to see whether we can approach this problem in a differentiable manner. All right. So now, yeah, so if we, so now that we establish all the problems and the task, now if we want to make this task differentiable,
So,
we want,
can
sure.
I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
So this third one is, you said NPR problem, right? Yeah. So I mean, the other thing I'm getting at is like, let's say like even if you can't solve the problem with the global optimum, so if you, let's say like you want to just do like an approximate solution, which might be it's still good enough, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, like if there is an abstraction, as are there like any other algorithm that are not really focused on the this problem, but like an abstract version of that?
All right. So uh, you mean abstraction of the tree search problem, Vishal?
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
is there like differentiable algorithm for NP hard problems?
Yeah, so I think people are trying to solve these combinatorial problems using gradient descent in general. Yeah, so I think in those workshops I also presented, so sampling and optimization in discrete space. So people were trying out different I think problems in different domains. Yeah, tree search is one of them, but yeah, I guess the combinatorial problems come in different data structures, I would say. So here the tree search problem is a bit general. um, yeah, at least for our understanding, people haven't approached this problem using like soft relaxation. So there are Bayesian approaches and some variation or inference based approaches. I'm not exactly sure the details of it, but uh, the way we approach this problem by making both the spaces soft was actually, I think, I guess the first demonstration of it. Yeah.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah. So now if you want to like attack this problem in a differentiable manner, we have to do a couple of things. Um, yeah. First one is the relaxation. So we know that if we want to have some sort of a differentiable function, we have to work with continuous variables rather than discrete stuff. So now I talked a bit about the sequences, and I told that each of these positions are combinatorial. So no, those are inherently not differentiable. So the first thing we need to do is make some relaxation. The second one is how do we optimize these parameters. And the third one is how can we improve performance of this search. So we'll briefly like look into these avenues, which is the most important part of the approach. So if we look at the first one, the first problem is we have combinatorial elements for each of these leaves. So what I mean by that is, if we have, let's say, a 5-length sequence here, these colors mean some discrete element. So those are not like greater than one another. Those are like different combinatorial choices. So they can be amino acid, some let's say bases. Yeah. So we have combinatorial choices. So we should have a way to search in this like discrete space. So that's one thing. The other one is discrete aspect of the adjacency matrix. So what I mean by that is, so any graph can be represented by the adjacency matrix where each of these represent the node numbers. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in the adjacency matrix, we all know a one um, in a cell means that those two are connected with some directed edge. So we can see that the trees are also inherently discrete by the way they are connected. Yeah. So we have to approach these two problems in order to travel this tree and sequence space in a differentiable manner. We'll look at the first problem of the nature of leaves or nature of sequences, and how can we do that. So this is actually very easy problem, very easy problem in sense. So if we have this 2D matrix, what we can do is we can have another dimension over the number of combinatorial elements. So this is called the Gumbel softmax tricks or softmax trick. So it's very easy to make combinatorial sequences differentiable. We just need to have another dimension where each position signifies a particular amino acid. So now that we have another dimension, all these values can be continuous variables, and we can obtain a probability distribution for each of these elements through a softmax or a different function. So this is the first thing that we do to relax the nature of leaves, nature of the sequences. This is not just leaves actually, but the sequences. All right. So
So to see if I understood right. So in the first
sure.
top like matrix,
Yeah.
the 2D one, what you have is a sequence for every row.
Yes. Yes. So this axis is the length of the sequence.
So that's
Um,
is that like some amino acid sequence, or is it the
Here it's just a hypothetical sequence, but we can think of it as a amino acid sequence where like the green might indicate a particular amino acid and blue might indicate another, so on. Yeah, so here I'm representing four sequences, four species, and its corresponding sequences with a different color. So yeah, so we are converting this matrix into a tensor where along another dimension. So I'm just like color coding this, but actually it's like continuous variables where in this tensor we have, continuous variables for each of these positions. What I indicate by here is that, so this, let's say, let me quickly have a different color. So this position can signify the green combinatorial element. So it can be a particular amino acid. And this element right here, that can be another, this blue color one. So what I'm going to do is I have another dimension for all the possible elements of the amino acids or the combinatorial elements. And through those continuous variables, I can have a probability on how probable it's going to be this green amino acid or the
okay, it's
green combinatorial.
basically, so if I think I can think about it, if I assume that it is only one that is possible, then it is like one hot encoding.
Yeah, so in this illustration, like it's very yeah, it's like a one-hot encoding in this illustration because there's this color is all blank and this color is all red. But in reality, this can be like a probability such that in each of these rows actually sum up to one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can do like a softmax or argmax and then get the one hot encoding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in each position, these probabilities should sum up to one. Yeah. Let me see whether I have better illustration on
I
that.
think I understand it.
Sure. All right. Okay. Now that we sort of have an understanding about how we make the sequence-based differentiable, now the hard part is to tackle the discrete aspect of the adjacency matrix. So yeah. So yeah, now we should have the ability to travel this discrete space of the adjacency matrix. Yeah, so the first thing is the most straightforward thing that we can do is, in order to make this discrete aspect of the adjacency matrix continuous, we can just parameterize like this part of the matrix. So what I mean by that is, so let's say we have 4 leaves. So here we have 0, 1, 2, 3 yellow color leaves. So in the adjacency matrix, this first 4 columns are all zeros, as you can see. The reason is this each of these 0, 1, 2, 3 leaves cannot be connected to each other, and another ancestor cannot be connected to a leaf, right? So what I mean is that the leaf should be at the very last depth of the tree. So that's why this entire first 4 columns are 0 for the first 4 leaves. So what we can try to do is we can parameterize. Yeah, so before going on to that, so rather than discrete elements for these positions, we can have some weighted adjacency matrix such that each of these edges represent some weight on the directed edges. So that's like a weighted adjacency matrix. I mean, it's not something new. This is happening in, I think, probabilistic graph models. So we can have some continuous parameter on the weight of the adjacency matrix. That's the first point in making this continuous. The second point is what we can do is, so as I mentioned, the first 4 columns should be all zeros because they cannot be connected to each other. But the last columns can have some value. So in fact, we parameterize it as some continuous variables. Now what we can do is we can have a row-wise softmax in which it has some probability on the parent it gets connected to. So this is also very straightforward. So what I mean by that is we have adjacency matrix. The last three columns we parameterize as continuous variables. That's the parameter space that we search on, which has like full support on the continuous space. Then we can make apply row-wise softmax and have a probability such that, so let's say this is the zeroth leaf. So the zeroth leaf has a probability of 0.6 that it's connected to the root of the tree. That means the last node of the tree. So this first element has probability of 0.7. Likewise, we have some soft tree present. So with this soft approach, what I initially tried was trying to solve the first problem. So the first problem, if we recall again, we had all the nodes and we knew all the nodes here. I mean, the ancestors and leaves, we knew everything, but we didn't know the tree. So what I initially tried was to approach this problem through this soft formulation. And this is let me play this video. Yeah, so this is running gradient descent on that adjacency matrix and finding the tree topology. So to recall, we know the ancestors and the leaves. So ideally, my ground truth tree is like a complete binary tree. That means it's like very nicely connected. At each node, there are two children with same depth. So it eventually converges to the ground truth tree. So if we go back, like this is the same adjacency matrix that we talked about here. This right side one, the green color matrix. So we start with some random variables and gradually we converge to the like the tree topology. So this is good, but this is just the first problem that we approach. So in the first problem, we know the ancestors and the leaves. We know the ancestors and the leaves. Only thing is unknown is the tree. All right. So now this
on like the results you showed is a demonstration on some particular example, or it's just like
oh yeah, it's actually a demonstration on one example where I think here there were, I think 64 leaves, 64 leaves. Yeah, so this is just a demonstration on one example actually. Yeah. So this.
Yeah, I was just wondering like why you just get the diagonal because you have a ground truth known.
Sorry, Dushana.
No, it converges to the diagonal, like some sort of a very clean.
Yeah. So actually,
which means
yeah.
the
So
arrangement is like curated, right? So it's some data set that you.
yeah.
Like,
so yeah. So here I generated a ground truth tree topology. How I did that is I started with a random sequence,
yeah,
and I made two copies of it, and I at each bifurcation I added constant number of evolutionary mutations. So in this example that I gave, all the ancestors are connected in nicely in this fashion. Here, like here we have some 4 leaves, and the numbering of the nodes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. The ordering is like very nice. That's why this diagonal is there actually. Yeah. Yeah. So the ground truth tree is the diagonal. So when it searches, I think it initially looks at different arrangements and converges to the best tree topology, which is the diagonal. Yeah. So now this is good. So we yeah, feel free to ask questions if anything's not clear. So for the first problem, this worked well, but now when I try to approach the third problem, what I encounter is through this search, I encounter graphs which are not trees. So this was a like big problem. So now when we parameterize this whole space, we run out of the tree space actually. So ideally we want to search for trees, but what we end up is things like disconnected components. So this is a graph. So any adjacency matrix can represent a graph, but it has cycles as well. So here there's a cycle. Yeah, so here there's cycle and there's disconnected components. So it was a bit hard to actually prevent cycles and disconnections when I parameterize in this manner. So, however, in the causal learning literature, there were a couple of soft acyclicity constraints proposed. So what I mean by that is, so they have a nice equation, which is a function of the adjacency matrix. So there's a function, we just input the adjacency matrix, and there's a temperature parameter, and we can have a soft acyclicity constraint. So that's like a very interesting paper in NeurIPS. There are more work actually in this regard. So what they can do is have another cost term such that it quantifies how many cycles are there. So that's what I tried next. But actually, when I was searching for large trees, this was a bit hard to optimize. So this soft acyclicity constraint, sometimes at the end of running, I encounter a tree topology which has a soft acyclicity constraint which is non-zero. Because of that, I have some cycles in it. Yeah. So are there any questions about that aspect, about the soft acyclicity constraints? If I try to quickly show that. Yeah, so just to like give you a brief idea about what I'm talking about. So yeah, so there's like an equation which is like a parameter of the input is the weighted adjacency matrix. So that soft acyclicity constraint is zero only if there are no leaves. Yeah, so this is very, I think, widely used in the causal learning literature, where if we know all the nodes of a tree, how can we find the best tree? Now, however, since that did not work, what I'm trying to do next is, can we prevent cycles from happening in the first place? So rather than parameterizing the whole set of the adjacency matrix, how can we prevent cycles happening? So when we search in this continuous space, we do not encounter anything which is not a directed acyclic graph. So what we are asking is, can we prevent cycles? So there's this nice property of directed acyclic graphs. So directed acyclic graphs means it's like a superset of trees. The only constraint is there should not be cycle. So the nice property of these directed acyclic graphs is that if we have some adjacency matrix of a DAG is a direct acyclic graph, we can permute it such that it's strictly upper triangular. So if someone gives us a DAG like this, so this is like a directed acyclic graph where there's no cycles. What we can do is, so there's this 1, 2, 3 number ordering here. So there are no cycles here, but in the adjacency matrix, there's a 1 here. However, any DAG can be topologically sorted. That means we can give a bit different ordering for the nodes such that this adjacency matrix is strictly upper triangular. So that was a nice property that we can exploit in order to parameterize only this upper triangular space. So just to recall again, if we have 1, 2, 3, these elements, we can permute those elements. I mean, 3 and 2, we can order it in a different manner such that we just need this space of the adjacency matrix to represent this DAG. So in this project, what we did was that actually that was the main, thing that we exploited to get rid of cycles. So here now, rather than this whole set of columns, previously we had this whole last three columns, but now we just permute the, we parameterize this part. So I think in one of the group meetings, this parameterization got a name called the Nevada constraint because of its shape. So now we have two, soft parameterization for the tree and sequence space. So just to summarize what we have here now, so what we have is we can have continuous variables here, and we can have a probability distribution along its parents like this. So as another constraint, we have this regularization constraint such that each of these columns should be approximately 2. What I mean by that is, so at each parent, there should be ideally 2 children. So that's what we are looking here. So like in terms of the loss function, we have this, so we have continuous variables, we have a softmax activation on each row. Then we have another regularization such that each column should sum up to 2 because each parent should be ideally have 2 children, since we are searching for this bifurcating tree space.
So you know the hierarchy also, like at level. So the last column basically consists the highest, like oldest.
So actually the last element is actually the root. Likewise, we sort of fix the tree topology. I mean, we fix the ordering of the nodes, but the content of that node can be different. So what I mean by that is, so with this topological ordering, as you mentioned, we actually fix the we fix such that this can be the last element. Let's say this is the 7th element. We fix the topological ordering such that we cannot encounter something like 3 here and 6 here. We have, we have strictly decreasing nodes. But the thing is, each of these ancestors are just placeholders.
So you have another dimension to basically find what it is.
Yes, that's correct. So so that's actually the nice property that we exploit here. So in the causal learning, this is not possible. The reason is, in the causal learning literature, what they have is they have some predefined matrix. So they actually know the entire sequences beforehand. So what I mean by that is they actually try to solve the first task where we know all the nodes. If I quickly go there. So let's say in that literature, we have all the representation of the nodes, and we want to come up with the best tree. But the problem is, if we just parameterize the strictly upper triangular matrix, we lose the ability to connect a different node. So what I mean by that is, in the matrix, if I have, I'm just trying to draw parallels on that reason why they cannot actually exploit this fact, I think. So in their work, they have some representation for this X. So they have some data they want to express, X1, X2, X3, and so on. So there's this some property of those parameters. But the thing is, these can also change as well in that work. So however, here, since as you mentioned, we have another dimension for these placeholders, we can nicely exploit this upper triangular property. At least that's what I'm trying to draw the parallels. So now, yeah, so now I'll show now that we have these two relaxation, how can we search for these two spaces? Yeah, for that, I think this I'll go back to the presentation. It's maybe easy to show it there. In summary, now we have two representations for the adjacency matrix and the sequences, which are differentiable. Now we need to come up with a score function, which expresses this like the total evolutionary cost. So how I do that is, I don't actually have a slide for that, but I'll quickly show what's happening there. I'm not sure whether this is like very visible. So now we have a soft adjacency matrix and a soft sequence matrix, these two matrices. So we need to find a cost function such that we can calculate the total number of evolution changes based on those two parameters. So in summary, I'll like briefly explain what this cost function does. So it turns out that using nice matrix of like linear algebra operations, we can manipulate these two matrices in order to derive a cost function, which is dependent on these soft relaxations. So what I mean by that is, in some intuitive sense, what we are doing is, so now since we have this soft sequence representation, we can just slice that each character dimension. So if we slice this dimension, what it essentially represents is some probability that each of these positions can be the amino acid this particular leaf requires. So in essence, the cost function is we slice this each character dimension, and then we look up from the adjacency matrix. So this is the adjacency matrix, soft matrix. We can like look up the parent sequences. So this is like the all the sequences in that character dimension, this right side. This is the connections. So this multiplication means we are just looking up which sequence to pick. So in that way, we can have the parents. And finally, what we do is we just get the absolute difference of these two. So that's like the intuition of this cost function. So we can essentially find a cost function which is dependent on this, soft soft matrix and the soft sequences. So once we sum up all these things, we have a differentiable score function which calculates the total number of evolutionary cost. Yeah, so that's like the brief intuition about the score function. It's just coming up with like linear algebra operations to calculate the total evolutionary cost at each edge. Yeah, so like coming up with this part was a bit tricky at first, but like once we write it, it was like straightforward to do so. I just like did this for the 0, 1 case and just extended for another character dimension. Initially, I just did this for just binary sequences. Right. So now, okay, now we have soft tree, soft sequences. Now we have a soft score function as well. Now the hard part is to optimize this. So initially I tried to optimize in the sense run gradient descent on these two parameters, which is the tree space and the sequence space. But what I encountered is that since these two are very connected to each other, what I mean by that is, let's say we have a particular tree and sequences. Once the tree topology changes, the score function might drastically change because the sequences are no longer in sync with that tree. So then what I tried was alternatively optimizing. I optimized the tree for some iterations, and then I optimized the sequences while keeping this tree fixed. So that actually worked reasonably well. And finally, what I ended up doing is this bi-level optimization, where this theta t means the best tree parameters. So in this bi-level optimization problem, it's like very similar to what meta-learning does, where we have to optimize some hyperparameters and the weights. So here, if we formulate in a bi-level optimization, what we have is this best tree parameters depend on the best sequence parameters for that tree topology. So this is like the best sequence parameters. And the best sequence parameters also is a function of this tree that's fixed at some point. So what I do is I have this inner optimization that runs for k gradient descent steps. And when doing the gradient calculation through automatic differentiation, what happens is this entire thing is unrolled such that we can have a better direction for how the theta t should be updated. So what I mean by that is at a particular theta t, we run k gradient descent on the sequences and we see how well this tree topology can perform based on that fixed tree. And then we have a better update for the trees. So that's what ended up having the best, I mean, best in the sense like as of now, the best score. Yeah, so this is like very common in meta learning as well. So this in mammal paper, which was this idea was I think unveiled. So there are a couple of tasks they do. So I'll not try to explain this, I guess. So like there are 3 subtasks that they're trying to do. This is like a multitasking task, I think. So based on the performance of each of these tasks, they unroll the gradients and get a better direction for the weights of the neural network. So that's like drawing some parallels about that work. All right. So in summary, this is how it looks like when we run this algorithm for like 32 sequences, which have 256 length sequences and 20 amino acids possible. Yes. If I try to recall again. So here the leaves are known and the unknown ancestors are there, which we try to find, and the unknown adjacency matrix is there. We just try to optimize these 2 parameters through gradient descent. Yeah. So in summary, so this is like the performance evaluation. Here, the leftmost column means the optimal solution. That means the global optimum solution. And this is what our method converges. So for around 32 leaves, the error is like 1% in terms of the, so this columns actually represent the evolutionary cost. I didn't mention it, sorry. So what this means is for a tree with 4 leaves, there is 277 total evolutionary cost in this total tree. And this is like how our solution converges. So as you can see, the mean error with respect to the best ground truth or the best global optimum is around 900 total evolutionary cost, which is as a percentage around 8%. So our next steps would be to see whether we can like further go to a better, better optima than this, so that it might be helpful for phylogenetic inference tasks. So in terms of limitations, so currently the only objective that we optimize is the parsimony score, which is the total number of evolutionary changes, which is actually dependent on the element wise. So each of these positions in the sequences does not depend on each other. So each of these positions are regarded like independent. So in future, we intend to model these higher order dependencies through some different differentiable, deep learning method, maybe a protein language model. So, rather than just the evolutionary cost, how many changes happen, we can obtain a better score. That could be a future case. So I would like to thank some of these individuals who actually helped in giving feedback on this initial work and some libraries that we actually used. I guess that was like the brief idea about the project. I hope I didn't overcomplicate stuff. Feel free to ask questions if you have any.
So I have one question. If you go back to the previous one.
Sure. A
The
bi-level optimization.
Another column.
Sure.
Yeah, that's one. So, so what's the real problem? The scale of the real problem is like.
Sure. So, in the phylogenetic regeneration tasks, they usually have some, I think, marker gene for these species in order to build these trees. So I think in reality, the specs that we chose, so we have like 256 length residue proteins and up to 128 leaves that we evaluated. So actually, it also depends on the task as well. So I think some phylogenetic inference task requires a very long sequence as well. Yeah, so at the workshop, I met some people mentioning that they have just 32 length sequences, but they have thousands of these leaves. So that's one extent of the problem, just 32 length, but 1,000 leaves. And I think in some cases, they might, rather than just one gene, they might be looking at a very long sequence as well. So I think in this evaluation, we sort of chose some reasonable extent for that. But I think it's an exact use case can drastically depend. So another limitation of our work is, since we are not predicting, we are just searching in this high dimensional space, the complexity also actually increases as the tree also grows large. So that's a limitation. As the task gets bigger, in like deep learning problems, we can quickly do the inference in predicting something, but here that limitation is there.
Any questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, thank you, Ramith.
Sure.